All the microphones are adjusted. Everybody can grab one if they need to talk. And you're getting ready to go live? I'm too tall for the camera. I can see the screen, but I'm not wearing my hat. It's cutting it off right where my hat should be.
How many are watching it on the computer?
Well, not very many, but they may watch it over the next few days, and then they'll all say, well, why does he wear his hat on the inside? Okay. Let's get started with a warm welcome and a good evening to another Sechelt e-town hall. And the e-town halls are something we've started over the last 2 to 3 years, 4 years maybe, and we really appreciate the way that staff have turned this town hall format into one that's an internet connection as well that lasts and goes past the evening, but also allows for interaction for people who are at home as well today. So tonight we're looking for your views on including different types of care facilities in our community. We'll be using what we hear tonight and through other public engagements, such as this afternoon, to draft land use policies for these types of projects. As our residents age, there are increasing demands for a range of care options in our community. The district needs to put policies in place that help ensure care center developments are planned for in a way that best meets the needs of the clients of these facilities, meets the needs of the clients these facilities serve, and the vision of our community. Earlier this year, Trellis introduced a proposal for a care facility located in a residentially zoned area of West Sechelt. That proposal met with a variety of community concerns. It also showed us the need to discuss with our community what is important from a land use perspective in reviewing care facility applications and to consider making this part of our official community plan. And that's really the impetus for this project now and the amendment to the official community plan that will be coming. This public engagement is not specifically related to the Trellis application. It's actually to consult with our community about how we want to see care facilities incorporated into our community whenever they come and in whatever area of the community they may be. It's also important to note that the Trellis has put its application on hold until these policies are in place. So they understand we're going through this and we're going to do some policy work. Their application is still active but on hold until we've had a chance to think this one through. This evening, I'm going to just acknowledge that this event is open both to the public at the district office, the people that are here this evening, and it's also being live streamed on YouTube. A guide to participation is available on Sechelt.ca by clicking on the e-town hall link on our home page. And this guide was also circulated as part of the Sechelt's Community Update newsletter in this week's edition of The Local. Am I to give the rest of the instructions or do I turn it over to... I can continue. So you can send comments and questions 3 ways if you're watching this live or if you're looking later. First, via the web form on the eTown page, and that's what we have here. Secondly, through the Facebook event page or via Twitter using hashtag #SecheltOCP. And the issue that we're talking about is the Spectrum of Care e-town hall. The district is also seeking input through a survey, which is available on our website, and this survey will remain open until September 30th, so you've got lots of time for that. Everyone is encouraged to provide input through the survey. As part of this evening's presentation, our district community planner, Mr. Aaron Thompson, will be providing a snapshot of survey input received to date. Earlier today, an open house was hosted on tonight's topic. In his presentation a little later, Aaron will also speak about the input that we received this afternoon between 4 and 6 o'clock. I'd like to remind our audience that input can be submitted electronically, and I'll be doing this throughout the evening when I get back to the microphone. Remind our audience that we can submit electronically through Facebook event, through our Sechelt.ca Town Hall input page, or to hashtag #SecheltOCP on Twitter at any time. For our live audience, and there is a few of us here today, we'll be checking in with you following the first portion of the staff presentation, and it will be an opportunity both to give comments and to give questions or to just raise concerns, depending on your consideration of the event. So it's now my pleasure to pass the microphone over to our community planner, Mr. Aaron Thompson. He's going to keep his own microphone. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So first, I would like to go through a bit of the background we have on this proposal. This needs come, as His Worship did describe, when we were looking at the Trails proposal and realized that there was a lack of policies dealing with the variety of care facilities throughout that we have been encountering in recent history. We currently in the OCP only have about paragraph and a half about policies of seniors care. And then many of our other policies fall on the residential side. They don't directly correlate to a lot of the care facility applications that we've been seeing and has caused some issues. So we're looking at addressing these issues through this OCP amendment process, and that's why we are seeking the community's input. Next slide, please. So some of the key questions we're trying to answer through this process is, what exactly is the use? With many of these different types of care facilities, there's many definitions floating around. Different jurisdictions throughout the different provinces, even from the international perspective, there are different ways of defining these kinds of care, what each one contains, and there's a lot of different models. So we need to kind of determine what these uses are and what that means for the Sechelt. Another key question I'm trying to answer is, where should these uses be located? The district is a large community, has very much different neighborhoods with different service levels. So determining where these places belong is key. Then there's some more of the technical aspects, such as how intense or dense should these uses be? Should they be fairly low level, 1 to 2 stories, kind of with a single family home theme, or should they be more higher density, such as like small apartment buildings or even higher? And then there's also questions, of course, of community amenity contributions, which are typically taken when we have developments go through new developments. And that could be amenities that are contributed directly kind of related to the service that will directly serve the new residents coming into our community, or funding or other resources to enhance existing community amenities that would be increasingly strained by additional people coming to our community. And then a key and crucial issue is, how should affordability be addressed? The district, and as a municipality, does have some tools around ensuring affordability, but what kind of percentage and what should that look like? And then, of course, how should universal accessibility be addressed? The district has already taken some great stands about moving towards universal accessibility, and there is policies around that, but should that be what should that look like? Should it be a percentage, flat, complete 100% accessibility? These are the kind of the questions we're hoping to answer through this process. Next slide, please. So what we've initially proposed is using a spectrum of care model. As you can see here on the slides, on the left is kind of the independent living. So this is the kind of more typical living arrangement where you aren't in need of any kind of care. You're independent. You're able to make your own decisions and aren't relying on anyone else for any services outside your home or within your home. Then as you move to the right, care levels increase. It also becomes maybe slightly more institutionalized. So the first kind of real step on the spectrum of care is the independent supported living. And so this is housing with some support services, such as some personal care and some cleaning, or then you move up again to assisted living. I guess, we can go here. Yeah, so there's some hospitality services, sorry, not personal services. Those, again, with definitions are very important about defining those, as some people interpret some things differently. So that is something we are looking at doing through this process. But yeah, independent supported living will may include services such as meal preparation, light housekeeping, laundering, social and recreational activities, and 24 emergency response. And to kind of put that in the local context, an example would be the Lions Housing Society's Green Court building. Next slide, please. The assisted living, again, moving up in the levels of care, includes both those hospitality services and those personal services. But residents still remain quite independent, able to lock their own doors and make decisions on their own. Again, those hospitality services are similar to what would be provided in independent supported living, but also includes those personal services such as aid in tasks such as bathing, grooming, dressing, some medication reminders, and other tasks. The local example would be the Christensen Village in Gibsons. Next slide, please. Long-term care, this is getting into where people are starting to not be able to take care of themselves fully, and they're maybe starting to lose some of their independence. So this is typically characterized by 24-hour medical personal care with in a protected and supportive environment. These services include meal preparation, housekeeping, laundering, social and recreational activities, as well as some of the more medical services such as dressing changes, incontinence management, management of care plans, other specialized services such as dementia care. Some of these facilities may also be looking at including provide care in the short term as respite for caregivers. The local examples are both the Twillem Large and the Shorncliffe Long-Term Care Center. Thank you. Next slide. So then we're getting to hospice and support and palliative care. So this is the end-of-life care. This is for the supportive and compassionate care focused on the comfort, quality of life, respect for healthcare treatment decisions, psychological, cultural, and spiritual concerns for people nearing the end of their life and their families. This is something that we only have 2 beds currently on the coast in the Shorncliffe Long-Term Care Center. They provide services such as pain and symptom management, nursing services, home support, counseling, and again, respite for caregivers. Next slide, please. And finally, kind of capping off the end of the spectrum, getting to quite the institutionalized side, is acute care, emergency care, or critical care, also known as like hospitalization. This is care designed for the short term, where people enter this level of care with the end goal of returning to their homes or the previous level of care. And this provides you a wide variety of medical services, everything from surgery, doctor visits, everything like that. And the local example, of course, would be the Sechelt Hospital. So that's the background and overview of this, of what the spectrum of care is and what we are looking to get out of this official community plan amendment.
Thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate that. I think it's time now to see if there's any input from those that are gathered here today, if anyone would like to speak to the issues. And we also have some questions coming across the email, and we have one from Mr. Darcy. Perhaps should I read that out, or were other people going to read those out? Let's start with the first one. One of the questions to be asked is about the definition, and comment here is that this definition does not cover the much more common and desirable facility that it's available off the coast. With lots of wonderful respect for the Lions Club support and for their efforts with the Green Court, it's far down market from what is commonly available elsewhere. The coast has nothing comparable where residents are able to pay some more for included group activities, free bus, and other transport to events and appointments and shopping, full exercise rooms, and even a pool, visiting doctors and services. And there are some of those facilities in Victoria, Vancouver, White Rock, for example. And I know that 2 of the projects that were examined last night and put forward by council, one of them very specifically is moving towards the model that Mr. Darcy is asking for here. So we need to make sure he's saying that those definitions are also included in the OCP. I'd like to remind the audience that they can provide input electronically through our Facebook event, through our Sechelt.ca Town Hall input page, or to Twitter at #SecheltOCP at any time. Anyone from our live audience would like to make a comment or come forward? I see at least one person that might be ready. Go ahead. Thank you. We'll just make sure the microphone is turned on.
To start with, we on the Sunshine Coast have very vocally told VCH, District of Sechelt, and whoever, that we do not want private health care. By VCH contracting with Trellis, I believe that the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority is abrogating its responsibility according to the Canadian laws and regulations to protect adults in institutional care setting from abuse and neglect. And that comes directly from the package that they put out. Because I'm having to ask a question, I'll try and form it that way. I would like to direct my question to VCH through the District of Sechelt. And my question is, why not look at the following concept that I would like to propose? There's 11.6 acres on the property where the hospital is located. This is where a new long-term care facility belongs in public funding. We are told that there's not enough room there. There's too many cars. I believe with the proper reconfiguration of certain buildings, it can be constructed on the hospital grounds without Trellis or any other private organization. There's an old nurse's residence on the property. Tear it down. As far as parking, cars, too many cars, construct an underground parking lot, just like they do at St. Paul's and every other hospital and other places. And if there's not enough room to build a facility, a long-term care facility, horizontally, then let's consider building it vertically, just like they do with the apartment buildings. We can go up, and we can go up as far as the district will permit. Vancouver Coastal Health Authority must kill the contract with Trellis. We do not approve of public money going into private pockets. And considering the Christensen property that they are now looking at, I think if VCH reads the covenant, it will find out that it is explicitly in not providing any private sales. At the time this covenant was written, all health facilities were public. I worked in one before the act was permitted. Therefore, it must be interpreted that Mr. Christensen was referring to public health facility care only. Thank you. If this can be passed on to Vancouver Health Authority, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for putting that on the record. And we will be able to pass that on to VCH and keep it in mind when we're developing our own policies. There's lots of thoughts there that we need to take into consideration, especially for that long-term care, the most institutionalized side that Mr. Thompson was referring to earlier. This is an interesting question came in through email. I'm not sure if we have a precise answer, but I think we might be close. Does the district have an estimate on the number of residents that need care facilities in the next 20 years? Mr. Thompson?
So we have been able to pull the stats from Statistics Canada. So though this may not be 100% accurate, we are looking at our current population is over 50% over the age of 50. And 34% is over the age of 65. That's showing a huge population that will be moving into the closer range when you'll be expecting these facilities. We are, of course, also experiencing quite a high growth still, quite a high constant growth. So we are getting about 2% population growth per year. So the absolute number of people on the coast is also increasing.
Yeah. So I could also add that the VCH proposals themselves show their planning between now and 2025, show that our need for long-term extended care will be 80% higher than current rates. We know we're not meeting our current rates, and I was informed this afternoon by one researcher that that equated to 185 new beds by 2025. That's only 7 years from now. And Alice has a question or a comment? Councillor Lutz, sorry, too informal.
Yes. Those numbers you're talking about, the census and our local numbers, does that include the beds that will be formed because of the new seniors residents that are at third stage of approval now? I don't think that is a part of our population that's been calculated into this, because they could be 40 or 50% of them new residents to the coast that will be aging out.
So yes, those numbers would be the people existing, at least the Stats Canada would be the ones existing on the coast right now in the last year.
And again, VCH and Stats Canada would be looking at the patterns of aging that are in place and have been in place for the last while. If we change that because of new developments that encourage slightly more retirees to come here, or even older than retirees come in for assisted living, that would change the numbers a lot. Maybe not a lot, but it would change it a little bit. And we'll have to bring that up with VCH when we bring up other things, that if our mix of elderly changes, then those aging out may also change. It's hard to get a number on this because, of course, growth and population isn't a fixed line, and development isn't a fixed line. For as long as I know, we were population of 9,400 and waiting to be 10,000. It took 20 years, and all of a sudden we've got 10,200. So it seemed to happen overnight. And a question from the floor or a comment?
Did I hear right that the VCH?
Could you go to the microphone, and we'll raise it up a bit too if we need to.
Did I hear right that
That's better.
VCH is...
Somebody turned it off.
Hello.
Thank you.
Did I hear right when someone said that VCH estimates that they needed 185 beds?
I'm presenting that as information that I heard. New beds, because our population of those in need of care will be 80% higher than it is now. We have 100 beds now, 20 beds promised in the next growth. We don't know where that'll be. That's 120. And if we'll need 80% more than that, that would bring us up to 185.
Because what they proposed with Trellis was like 110, which was totally out to lunch. I mean, where is their vision? It seems to be nowhere.
We know that VCH haven't provided on the Sunshine Coast quite the numbers that their own population guidance provides. So we're working with them to do that.
I'm hoping that the new administration in Victoria will tune in VCH and get them on side, because what's happening here is ridiculous. It's irresponsible. And how's the community supposed to react? We're going to build something that has 110 beds, which is like 10 beds more than what we have. There was an example there of we had 2 beds for this certain category. Yeah. That category needs to increase tenfold.
Well, that was the hospice and palliative care, and it's true that
with
we have more than 2 people that die. Yeah.
How can they propose, oh, we'll double it to 4, or we'll double it to... I can't comprehend where they're coming from.
Okay, thank you again for those comments, and we'll make sure they go forward to both the province and to VCH. More important for us tonight is to make sure we have the language in our OCP that helps direct and guide those developments if the new administration in Victoria goes in that direction, or if VCH moves in the right direction. We want to make sure our OCP has the guidelines that push us in the right direction. So that's really what we're looking at tonight, and any input you have on where these facilities should be located, the size and interaction with the surrounding community, the land use, that's the kind of things that would be helpful. Some more institutional or some less. So thank you and welcome.
Hi. A lot of you know me as Brenda Webster, but I'm Mrs. Cole now. I worked in Totem, Shorencliff, and the hospital for exactly 1 week. My main objective was I worked in Shorencliff. I know for a fact that Shorencliff has 2 palliative rooms. They were built about 10 years ago, at the same time I started. Anyways, I turned around and I just sat down with a group, and I suggested, why don't we make Shorencliff palliative, just palliative, with hospice. There's a reason. Upstairs has a dining room and a big dining room and a nurse's station and a kitchen. Downstairs, same thing. Totem is connected to the hospital. Make that long-term care facility. You can go up, but they have an underground tunnel that connects to the hotel, to the hospital. So if they have to go and get X-rays, go to see a friend who is visiting the hospital, fine, let them do it. But to build a new facility that is privately owned, my mother was in a facility in Kamloops, privately owned. She has what is called bilateral neuropathy. It started on the feet and is already up to her hips. She has no feeling. So she fell straight down, hit the coffee table. She turned around, phoned me up and says, I feel pressure. I said, don't talk to me, talk to your doctor. So they did X-rays. She cracked her pelvic bone. Then she goes she comes home. A woman is at her door, 2 o'clock in the morning. This is a trellis place, which I didn't know about until later. She's on the phone with me, 2 o'clock in the morning, crying and whispering, I'm scared. I'm on my cell phone calling the RCMP. They go to the thing, found out that there's a woman brandishing a meat cleaver. So they took her the police called me back and told me what happened. I said, how does that happen? And he says, well, you have to go and talk to the owner, Trellis. They have public apartment blocks too. I know that they have 4 healthcare facilities. 2 are not open. Price of staying in one is far beyond a person can manage on a pension. And the other 2 are basically running low capacity. So I turned around and I said to my mom's doctor, I had to go up there. I said, will it take to get her on a publicly funded place? 4 years. I said, okay, fine. Put her on, I'm her power of attorney. Put her on the list. Then my mom falls again. This time she broke a leg. And then my mom turns around and she says, phones me up, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She goes, I'm moving. I go, what? Where are you moving to? She goes, I'm moving. I said, where to? And she says, a publicly funded place. I said, oh, great. When? I'm thinking 2 months down the road. Try 2 weeks. I'm down here. I had to phone my brother and said, drop what you're doing. You're going to move Mom. What I'm trying to say is, if you want, utilize what we have. Don't allow for more buildings. I'm pretty sure that VCHA can find the money. I'm pretty damn sure. As for, I was involved in what is called company flipping. I worked for, when I worked at Shorncliffe, I was a housekeeper, Aramark. Compass came in, underbid everybody, privately owned company, and they took our contracts. I had to go through hoops to get my job. I didn't get it. 1, I was active in the union. 2, I had WCB claim. 3, I had cataracts in both eyes, and they thought I misused my sick days. So I turned around and I thought, holy God, we can't have this. I know so many people in the 30 years I've been on the coast here. I came down from Vernon under the pretenses it doesn't snow. The first year I got here, it snowed 3 feet and I fell down the stairs. And my mother said, I said, what do you call this stuff? And she says, a figment of your imagination. Please do not let Charles in, and please think about getting the first floor of that old hospital with beds and getting everything else in place. Use what you have.
Okay.
You don't.
Yeah. Thank you very much for getting that on the record, and now we'll try and focus back on the planning that we can do in Sechelt rather than what the role of VCH is. We know, and it's important to get that on the record from this point so we can incorporate it. And if there's any comments from those who are watching, I don't know how many might be online today or not, but certainly the District of Sechelt Facebook event, which is on our District Sechelt website, Twitter at #SecheltOCP, or on the web forum on Sechelt.ca, different ways to communicate with us. And we're going to be open in this meeting until 8 o'clock or 8:30? 8:30. I feel like I'm on Channel 9 public television saying, please phone, please come in. We'll lower the mic for you just a minute.
Okay. I have one more thing to add. How many of you know that Trellis, as a privately owned company, has already gone along with the federal ruling that they can sell to foreign countries? Japan is able to buy our privately owned health care. And that should be brought out. Thank you.
Okay. And again, I'm not sure if ownership is something we can deal with in the OCP. And I want to remind people for the rest of the evening that this is actually not about any specific project or proposal. It's not about Vancouver Coastal Health. It's actually not about Trellis or Silverstone. It's not about Westbrook or the Ocean Stories proposals that we dealt with last night. What we're trying to do tonight is get those broad guidelines. Do you want these in residential areas? Should they only be downtown in the village? Should they be intermixed in various places? Should they be given special zonings for institutional use? Should they have specific, some communities have a fairly open zoning. You can have them in any zone, commercial, industrial, residential, residential 1. Others have more restrictive zones. Should there be limitations on height, size, and interaction with the community? Are there important amenities that we need to take into account if it's going to be an independent living or an assisted living? As we heard earlier this afternoon, there was a lot of concern about the importance of social interaction and ability to mix with other community members. And I'm not sure, is there some feedback on what we had this afternoon that we could go to at this point? And I'll look to Mr. Thompson maybe to say a few comments about what we heard this afternoon.
So the open house this afternoon, it was well attended. It was a good event that we had. We had about 40 people in attendance. There was some common themes we noticed just kind of off the bat. One of them is having our development focus more towards the downtown and the existing built-up areas. There's also some desire to see it in other areas such as the Davis Bay area, and as well as a lot of desire to see development near the existing Sechelt Hospital. So those are quite some of the more key points that we're really focusing on where the development should be. There's also quite a common theme through all the levels of cares, integrating them with the other levels of care, there's those multiple levels of care in each facility, from independent living up to the hospice and everything, so that so that you can kind of look at that campus of care model and having people able to transition easily between the different levels of care. We haven't had too much of a chance to analyze the results as we just got them, but maybe Ms. Letman can add some more themes that she noticed.
I was at the table.
It's my fault.
I was at the table with the independent supported living, so sort of like your retirement centers. And what we heard at that table was that it could actually go in a lot of different residential areas. People wanted to grow old in their own neighborhoods, but that the form and character of the developments had to match the existing residential. So 2 stories sort of fit into the neighborhood rather than a very large complex. The other thing we heard was that definitely any of these centers would need to be on a transit route so that both workers, families, and the individuals living there may be able to take transit. And that was an important part of it. The multi-levels of care was also something that came up, or the ability to easily move into the next level of care. So how that could work. Could you get home support if you were in an independent supported living environment, or could you get home nursing coming in? And I think that's something we could talk to Vancouver Coastal Health about. In my own situation, in my family, we have 3 visits a day of home support coming in to help out with my husband. And so I'm very familiar with the ways that program works, and I think it could work in one of these independent. Then people could actually stay in place possibly longer if they had the home support coming in.
So one question that would come from that is, as planners, could you tell us, do we move transit to where the residences are, or do we have to build a residence where the transit routes are? And if people need transit, important. Is it very easy to move transit to where the people might be, or is it the reverse? Something we have to do.
In discussions with the Sunshine Coast Transit, we know where the future routes are going to be, and that would be, I think, a wise thing to confer with them, make sure that any application goes to them for comment and try to ensure that the transit stops are going to be there by the time the development opens.
And one of the things Mr. Thompson mentioned was that a number of people wanted it to be close and in proximity to the hospital. Was there any sense of what that meant in terms of distance? And I'm thinking now that the hospital is actually in another jurisdiction, the Sechelt Indian Government District. So
Yes.
even if we built them on the border, we're not going to be real close.
Yeah, there was some conversations about that. I did see a number thrown out of 5-minute response time to the hospital. So that's still putting it within the kind of the downtown core, maybe within some areas of, say, maybe Selma Park and East Porpoise Bay, where those are relatively close there. So, getting to the other kind of point about transit and having it built there is, well, we don't currently have too much of a transit system, so it can kind of go either way, really. We could be looking at planning them closer to our future transit routes and our existing transit routes, or it could be planning for future transit routes and have the system kind of go around that as well. So, I think there is some flexibility there. We aren't built out like a lot of other communities in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. We still have a lot of room to grow, so we still have that flexibility. But it's definitely something to have very cognizant in our planning process.
Good. That's good to know. Do we have anybody online at the moment or not? And do we know if we have any viewers? I'm going to make a judgment about how long we prolong this if there's nobody actually online at the time. I'm noticing Bill is ready to ask for a comment too. Do you want to come towards the microphone? And
Bill, I'll bring the microphone to you.
Mr. Conway is the chair of our advisory committee, our accessibility advisory committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's not too often I get to talk at these town hall meetings because I usually don't do it. As the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I fully agree that accessibility to any public facility must be universally accessible. I've had the distinct privilege of working in some unique institutions in Sherdock Hospital in Hamilton, Ontario, that's my hometown. From the hospital in Blue Review in Toronto, Ontario, Children's Hospital out on Blue Review. Also at the George Pearson Centre in Vancouver. I've been around people with disabilities for a very, very long time, not only personally, but also interactively. The idea of having universal accessibility is important for a mother to push a stroller into a hallway to go visit a partner, a friend, a mother or a daughter or a sister or a brother or whatever it may be nowadays in genderizations. And getting to this place has to be also accessible. Now, yes, I may put on, and I'm not joking, Mr. Mayor, 12,000 steps a day in this community of Sechelt. I do not take a bus past Davis Bay. Pardon me, I only take a bus past Davis Bay. And that's all the way down to Gibson's. So my dog and I, we do a lot of traveling on his paws and my soles. And we do pretty good at it. This community has and will be and will continue to be, I hope, accessible for everybody. Because one day, Mr. Mayor, whether you believe it or not, you may need a cane to walk. I don't know. But you may need that accessibility concept built into your brain that one day I may have to use a walker. And how am I going to get across that street? And there's a 4-inch curb on the other side. That's fun to try and do. Do that with a scooter. When you access these public, and I really hope, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not going to go into a tangent of Trellis and everybody else, but it has to be a public facility, because that is the only way the facility will become fully accessible. Now, unless your OCP designates every turn, nook, and cranny to be accessible. Getting to a place, you must have transit. Because yes, when it's pouring down rain, I don't like to walk either. My dog wears a raincoat, and he doesn't like wearing it either. But I make him wear his booties in the snow, and he sounds like a Clydesdale. So, Mr. Mayor, you really have to look at this. Where are we going to put this type of facility? When I walk our community, I notice there's big, huge vacant property right across from Toledo or Clayton's Mall. Just sitting there. Somebody's making money off of that, or somebody wants to make money off of that, and somebody will make money off of that. That's a good place to put one, right there. Then the people who are going to live in there will have a beautiful view. Private, not a privately view. It's going to be a public view, because it's going to be a public facility, and it should be a public facility. The other place that is good for accessibility is, as one of the speakers said earlier, in behind the hospital. Yes, it may be on another government property, but I think you can go tit for tat and tat for tit and get what you want for our community. Because I believe the government of that land will also have members who will also go into this public facility and will also want accessibility to it all. Yes, I like to see my community brailled. That's impossible. But it's not, it can be made, can be done, but it's a lot of extra work. It's not needed. Would I like to see our place fully accessible? You better believe it. And when I look at how you should build this, when I walk that vacant lot that is sitting there doing nothing but growing wild grass that you can't even smoke. And it is important to have someplace where all the people can go and visit. Anybody and everybody. So that is a good place to me. The place up in behind the hospital is ideal because it's another good place. Now you look at Totem beside the hospital, as our earlier speaker said, there is access to and from the hospital within 3 seconds. Just go through a door. That's all you got to do. You're in the hospital tunnel, straight into an OR area maybe, straight into emergency, or up to the second floor to get daycare ideas or things attended to. So you can build up at Totem, and that is better to go up. But don't go any higher than the tallest ladder of your fire department. That is important, Mr. Mayor, and that should be put in the OCP. That no building should be any higher than the tallest fire truck ladder that we have here on the Sunshine Coast. Not the fire trucks in Vancouver. We're talking about the fire department here in Sechelt. So your height of your building should only reach the top step of a ladder, of a fire truck ladder. That's all. Any higher, it's a waste of your time, and you could be liable for not having the proper safety measures in place to protect people who live above the height of a fire truck ladder. So these are interesting comments I make here, Mr. Mayor, and I do it with great ease and understanding because I probably will end up in one of those facilities when I reach 120 years old. So I'm going to be around for a while, and I'll be here, and I'll be listening, I'll be watching, and I'll be walking. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conway, for those comments, and particularly in reminding us that accessibility is multidimensional. It's not simply the ability to walk, it's the ability to get to the places. It's the public accessibility. That's something that's public as opposed to private. Accessibility has multiple dimensions that we need to keep in our minds. And yes, we're all going to be needing these long-term facilities that we're heading towards. I certainly know I don't use a walker yet, but I will. I can see them in my future. Is there anyone on? There's some online, or oh, sorry, were you ready for some comments, Mr. Thompson?
If we have any other additional questions, but
Oh, there's some coming up on screen too, but we'll turn to the microphone in the in-house. Alex.
Thank you. I just like to say a few words.
A little closer to the microphone.
I think we're talking about leadership here. I think Sechelt has an excellent opportunity to look forward and do the right thing. I think we have an excellent facility, a brand new hospital that modern, up to date, and I think we can extend it with building a long-term care facility right beside it and take the time and figure out how to do it, how many facilities we're going to combine there, and we're going to free the first aid attendant to travel up and down Sechelt to gather people and take them to the hospital. Let's put them all there, and we can just put them in the wheelchair and take them for an X-ray or take them whatever we have to take them, not right across the country. We don't have to use natural gas or fuel to transportation facilities. Let's do it right, put it all together in one place, and people will love you for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I agree that it's a time for leadership for Sechelt, and that's one reason we're trying to do this OCP. We do have some questions from the microphone, and I just wanted to say, as we spoke about the hospital again, I was reminded by councillors that the hospital grounds are actually in regional district jurisdiction. I didn't know that they were taken out of federal band lands at any time. I thought it was still federal jurisdiction. So I'm not sure how that works, but apparently it's regional district jurisdiction for now. So we'll check into that. And we do have some questions, and we did ask the one on the right, so the one on the left. I'd like to see more development options where families can be involved and where seniors can support each other. Is that something that we can move towards, planners?
That is definitely something we can either look at allowing or supporting. This question brings a lot into, at least into my mind, of the co-housing movement. Where maybe this is a independent supported living co-housing development. That would be kind of a more unique kind of development, but it would definitely be something that we could look at having specific regulations around or anything else. The question about families also sparks a common theme that did occur this afternoon, where people want to have their families involved, especially towards, say, the palliative and hospice area, and having it so that families can visit, be comfortable, keep and have that connection throughout, say, end of someone's life, or in the kind of the emergency care area as well.
Yeah, the intergenerational and social interaction was really important at the tables I was speaking to today. And the second question that hasn't been asked yet is, the coast needs more of these types of services, and this reader and email says, I think they should be allowed to be developed in any residential area. And are they usually constrained, or is there a wide availability? What do other municipalities do, or what do we do now?
You want,
and I think Ms. Letman will answer that one.
Currently, the official community plan designates care facilities that include assisted living and care beds to be considered as community facilities, and that they come under the designation of civic, institutional, and utilities designation. And one of the questions we'd like to ask the public, is that still valid? The majority of the area of these designated areas are in the downtown core. But I personally feel that we're kind of limited right now in the terms of where a facility could go, other than perhaps beside the hospital. But in Sechelt itself, there isn't a lot of large pieces of land in the downtown core that would be available for civic institutional utilities. So that's one of the questions we're looking for. Could an acute or hospice or palliative care go into a residential area?
Okay, and the trending question came through, will this create any additional costs for the district of Sechelt? I'm not sure I could probably answer part of that, but if anyone would like to say whether the OCP amendments or having new facilities and a range of facilities will increase costs in any way to the district of Sechelt.
There will, of course, as you increase the population and increase the you increase the demand on services, which has a cost. However, that should be offset, of course, by increase in taxation. To a point, new development directly would be countered by our development cost charges to help pay for infrastructure costs in that way. So there should be a kind of a net neutral impact to the district.
I think for the building itself, it would be a net project because there'd be DCCs that covered the capital costs that would incur. For the community as a whole, though, there's a very strong economic benefit for having solid public facilities in place because of the wages and the professionals that are attracted. Every one of these institutions, even the assisted living or the independent living, which is very independent, still requires a staff. You still have kitchen, you have chefs, you have housekeepers, and as long as those are kept at a living wage, they add quite a dimension to our community, which then, of course, supports business, supports the contracting and the housing market in other ways. So we, as a council, in 2014, 2015, in our strategic plan, understood that developing this, what we call the seniors economy, is one of the strong three bases of the future of the District of Sechelt from an economic point of view. So rather than increasing costs, it should in fact give us some strong benefits and an intergenerational benefit because it'll create jobs for people who aren't in those homes. We've got two comments here. The one comment is about the trellis discussion and the fact that it was fully rejected by the seniors in Sechelt. And this email makes it clear that trellis and not-for-profit model does not belong in Sechelt. The public called for a nonprofit facility in town and close to the hospital, and nonprofit ensures the bottom line does not interfere with seniors' health care. And we heard this increasingly, that people are concerned that a for-profit motive may create a contradiction or a set of interests where the needs of those that are being served aren't met if the needs of the investors are in contradiction. So we'll have to think about that. And another comment from the same reader, Shorncliffe is exactly where it belongs and should be upgraded as required. Totem Lodge could be upgraded for hospice and palliative care facilities and extra beds. Now, we can't answer those questions here tonight. We can take that forward to VCH through the Regional Hospital District or through our own direct communications with them. And that's about all we can do. Again, we're trying to figure out how to work these institutions into the District of Sechelt in our own plan.
Though we can't actually require Vancouver Hostel to develop them at a higher density or in more intense use, we could also pave the way through our official community plan and zoning to allow for redevelopment of some of these existing sites to be at a higher density or say a higher height to allow for this redevelopment because they are currently kind of restricted by our current zoning. Our current zoning for a lot of these different sites is 10.5 meter height, so that's roughly 3 stories. And I believe it's around 50% lot coverage, which can restrict the actual how much service can be provided in a certain area.
So as an incentive to the Shorncliffe site, which is on Medusa, we could in fact open up the zoning so to allow for higher density or slightly different use. And that might encourage them to redevelop that site as opposed to abandon it or move on to something else.
It would make it could make the process easier and more enticing.
That's a good idea. And I think we've read those comments, and we appreciate the comments of people who are bringing them forward. I haven't seen the bottom one from Mr. Darcy, but I think we answered that first. He was talking about the definition. Yeah, that was the very first one we dealt with. Here's an interesting question, and it goes to both the planners and the council, from an Ellen Adelberg. I'm relatively new to the area, and I'm shocked at how slowly the proposals for new assisted housing developments appear to be moving ahead. I have elderly relatives who could use these, and I find it really hard to read when it's skating around. So I'm not sure who's doing that. Yeah, we have to scroll it down again. Can you scroll it down back? That's the one we're reading. Yeah, thanks. I have elderly relatives who could use these, and I expect I will also want to someday. What can council do to speed up the process of approvals and overcome NIMBY reactions to such developments? Maybe I'll start that one, and then the planners can also mention a few things from an organizational point of view. We have actually not had strong NIMBY reactions from the proposals in terms of the assisted living. There is some concerns of neighbors about the impact and how that will be, but it hasn't been a sort of dead set against this in my neighborhood. It's been what's the impact going to be and how can we mitigate those. In terms of the length of time it takes to do proposals, one of our councillors who's not with us tonight spoke quite strongly about that issue last night and the importance of doing careful due diligence, because we have a history of looking at mistakes that are made when things are being rushed through, especially when they're rushed through booming economic times. And we're currently in an economic construction economic boom that is very similar to the 2007 and 2008. And unfortunately, those of us on council can look at a number of projects that were approved in 2007 and 2008 that came back to haunt us because they were rushed through without the due diligence that's really required. So we think we are moving things along fairly quickly. I've been told by some construction people that, in fact, they couldn't build any faster than what they're building now. They simply don't have the worker and the capacity on the Sunshine Coast to keep up with the developments we're already approving. So I don't think we're getting too far ahead of the curve on this one. It's pretty much balanced. It does seem slow because we've had some transportation studies, we've had some second public hearings, but there's also some organizational issues, I think, in terms of due diligence of planning, and I wonder if the planners would like to speak to the process and how it compares to, say, the Lower Mainland or other areas.
Well, compared to the Lower Mainland, our process is much quicker. But kind of just a general process, going off the question of how we could look to speeding up the process of approvals. The real issue, of course, comes in that what many of these developments are asking for is not what we currently have either planned through our official community plan or permitted through our zoning. So that requires us to go through the process individual basis and make these changes. What the process we're currently undergoing with this OCP amendment will hopefully make it speed up the process, have quite a firm view of what the community wants. And then if someone proposes something that is not consistent with the plan, it could be a relatively easy decision to council to say deny it or require them to make those changes to be in line with what the community wants. And then that also provides a nice clear vision to the developer, knowing that, well, this is what the community wants and I'm going to do something different, that maybe I should change my mind or look to a different community. At the same time, you could also then looking at changing the zoning bylaw after the OCP amendment has gone through to bring it in line with what the community wants on an individual lot basis. So then we could look, as mentioned before, incentivizing redevelopment of certain sites or development of other sites. So.
Thank you. Any other comments on that one?
I just wanted to report that I think they're referring to two applications that were given third reading last night at the council meeting. And we will be meeting with the developers within the next 2 weeks to go over the next steps. And hopefully that will be fruitful in moving forward.
Yes, I think there is a bit of a myth in the community because of 1 or 2, 3 projects that were not moving exactly as quickly as they could have. And there was real good reasons for all of those. But in fact, this council, since 2014, has processed and passed more development applications than we've seen in the decades prior, far more than the last time we hit a peak was 2007, 2008. And then before that, it was at the turn of the century in 99, 2000. And we're seeing far more applications going through now. And our staff and our city and our community and our government hasn't really grown much despite all of that. So that's one of the reasons we're just dealing with that flow. Now we have another very interesting point from Mr. White. With a community spread across multiple areas, the OCP needs to provide opportunities for development in all of those areas. And no specific zoning needs to be introduced, this person suggests. So we could, in fact, allow long-term independent or assisted living in all of the jurisdictions and under current zoning, just making sure that our building size, shape, and configuration is governed by existing protocols. So if it's in a single-family residential area, you could have assisted living that conform to those kinds of sizes and heights and footprints, I suppose. And that allows neighbors to have some real certainty, Mr. White is arguing. And when larger developments are undertaken, there could be a requirement to include beds within their bounds. Not all facilities need to be large. Other communities have facilities as small as 6 beds, and these are sometimes known as group homes and institutions. I actually have an aunt in Regina, Saskatchewan, who was living in a 6-bed facility, which was a converted residential home, and the backyard of her unit backed onto another 6-unit project just on back to back, and they had the same kitchen staff, housekeeping staff, and other support staff between these 2 projects. So 12 people living in 6-unit projects, and it seemed to work really well, and that was Saskatchewan provincial government projects.
And to comment on that, our current zoning does allow licensed community care to up to 6 beds in any residential zone. So we do encourage that, and there are several of those types of homes within the community, but we certainly encourage more to be developed.
So we normally think of those as being licensed care for adults with developmental challenges or perhaps recovery or transition house, but there's no reason that couldn't be applied to elderly care or assisted living or independent. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they'd have to meet the either assisted living or the long-term care regulations.
Okay, so if there's any licensed practitioners who are interested in seniors care, that's an entrepreneurial opportunity. They could find in any residential area, convert one of these larger 4,000 to 5,000 square foot homes into a really wonderful 6-bed facility. And as long as they're licensed and can be licensed, I'll knock on the door and see if I can move in. Any other comments from councillors who are here and on what you've heard this evening or this afternoon that you'd like to add to the mix? Because we're going to be digesting this, or staff will be digesting it, then bringing it back to councillors. And we have, I'm not sure if the camera shows, but Councillor Lutz, Councillor Doug Wright, and Councillor Darnell de Seegers are listening and joining us this evening as well. And
I have one quick more question. One of the comments that got repeated at the table I was at this afternoon was that they wanted intergenerational interaction. Having the facilities located by schools was a really important part of that, so that there could be some programs where school kids could go in or they could visit family members, so that the proximity was there, or have part-time jobs after school. So that was an important thing to think about too, was location close to schools.
Yeah, I think the intergenerational mix is really important for all of us. I know even when I was a younger graduate student in Toronto, I could not stand living in the annex, which was right beside the graduate studies at U of T, because everyone there was between 28 and 35 years old. They were all graduate students. Now they've all matured into be professors in million-dollar homes, but at the time it was a student ghetto. I couldn't stand it. I moved out as soon as I could to a diverse neighborhood in the west side of Toronto, Parkdale, which has now also been gentrified. But and I'm sure when I'm 96 years old, I'd like to be in a place where I can actually see a diverse range of people and not just my colleagues in walkers. And another comment from the floor.
How much time you giving yourself before you come back to the community and present the plan? What is you looking for the future?
Okay, good.
How soon you want to move ahead with the project?
Good question. It wasn't on the microphone, so I'll repeat it. We're dealing now with an OCP amendment, and we're trying to gather information on this. So the question to staff would be, how soon do you think before you can actually bring this forward as an OCP amendment? And then I think behind the question too is, how soon do you think we'll see developments and entrepreneurs and others moving in behind our OCP amendments and saying, yes, we can do this. We want to build this way.
Well, for the first one, for the OCP amendment, we do have our online survey open till September 30th. We'd also be still expecting any other comments to come in and encouraging people to, write to us or anything else. Following that, we'll be looking at preparing a draft bylaw for the OCP amendment, and that will look at what we've heard and the specific changes, and bring that forward to the planning committee. So that could be either in October or November, dependent on how things go. And then hopefully this can go towards council and Of course, there'll be a public hearing also involved with that after it goes to council, and that will be another chance for, of course, people to kind of comment on the more specific bylaw. The hope would be to have the amendment maybe adopted before the end of the year. So then we'd have the OCP, I guess, ready for 2018.
Okay. And usually our role, usually our role, of course, is to set the table, and then entrepreneurs and others who want to do developments come forward to that table and say, okay, this is what we can do. My sense is from the demands of the community and also the economic interest of this council, that as this council has found its feet over the last couple of years, they see a stronger role for advocating and trying to encourage those who can do this to come forward and do it, both in terms of the public housing and with a different government in Victoria and in Ottawa. We've been told that there will, in fact, be more senior level government funds for affordability housing of all levels, and that would include seniors care. So you may find that this council, as a subsequent one, takes a more proactive role than you've seen in the past. Usually we set the table, let those come to the table that want, but I think that might change. We have another comment from the community here, and then before we do that, I just want to remind anyone who is watching that input can be submitted electronically through our Facebook event, through our Sechelt.ca town hall, or at Twitter on #SecheltOCP at any time. And for our live audience, we'll be checking in following any further comments. We're getting very close to the end of this, and if there aren't people on stream, I think like any town hall, we'll probably just sort of wind it down a bit early.
In talking to Naomi at BC Housing, which also has a name of she's the regional director development of BC Housing. She says they're planning to have an open house meeting in Sechelt on October the 3rd at the SIB complex.
Yes,
So.
that would not be for elderly care or seniors care, but just so people know there is potential for a public meeting, and we'll wait till the full advertisements come out on that, but it'll be for supported affordable housing for those who have challenges with houses. What I'm going to start calling the houseless community as opposed to homeless, but those without housing. Councillor Lutz?
This afternoon at the table I was at, long-term residents, it was rather interesting that a comment came forward around zoning that it might be a good idea to do it as a multiple kind of zoning, allowing more than just long-term. Some of the other levels of care could also be in that same zoning. And as a secondary issue, some like community health clinic, hairdresser, some commercial and retail attached to the same zoning, so that those would be available to residents, guests, visitors. And I thought that was rather a good approach, not to just specifically tie it to one level of care.
Yeah, I think many people, and I think that's the campus of care approach that Mr. Thompson referred to earlier. What about these other, what we might call ancillary uses, like hairdressing, or in the assisted living home that my mother lives in, they now have a pharmacy on the first floor that's open 3 days a week, so they have a pharmacist there.
Yeah. There's definitely mechanisms to do so. You could be looking at either an accessory use, and these are, of course, the technical zoning terms, the accessory use, or saying having it be a subordinate use. So though it's allowed in the zone, it's not going to be the main use. It's going to be, you have 10,000 square meters of, assisted living or something like that, and you have, say, 100 square meters for a hairdresser, or 100 square meters for a doctor's office, so that we ensure that the main use is the focus of the site, but it allows for the other uses. So.
And I guess from this conversation, the question would be whether those accessory uses were available just to the residents or actually to the broader community as well. So there was some interchange and interaction. People could come in and use them. So that would be something to think through. And as we learned on a project about 2 months ago, we don't want to forget the use that is in all residential areas, which is home-based occupation. There could be seniors in these homes that want to run small businesses from their suites, as long as it fits in with the neighbors and all of those things. So this online survey results that we've seen so far, and I don't want to be the only one talking because my voice is going, but it seems to be what has happened tonight. Results so far online: strong support for keeping the care facilities in the downtown and neighborhood centers, though we know that's not an exclusive use. We've heard several people today say residential areas and throughout the community is important, but stronger support for keeping it within the downtown and neighborhood. Very strong support for affordable units and accessibility, and I think we've heard that over and over, and that's probably part of why the issue of public provision comes in so strongly, because they know that if it's public, it's more likely to be affordable or accessible to all. And third strong survey result: they should blend into the community and not have a traditional institutional look. I'm not sure what a traditional institutional look is, but I suspect a prison or a small school shouldn't look like a prison.
Yes, that was, I think, the conclusion some people drew to, is they don't want to seem like they're in a prison or in a hospital if they are in these kind of care facilities. They want to, reading it, they should have a homey feel. They should be comfortable. It should be welcoming.
It's interesting when you think about that from design, because you can almost always recognize a hospital, and they're flat and they're built from the 1950s or the Stalin era, and they look like something. But I've seen hydro substations camouflaged as single-family homes. I've driven past. You can do all sorts of things with real heavy industry, and it's surprising they don't with institutions yet. They don't make it look like just another condo or peaked roofs and whatever. So we'll take that into next steps. Draft an official community plan amendment, and that is partly coming from the question that we had just earlier, so how long it'll take. But the next step will be to draft an official community plan amendment. We'll bring that draft bylaw to the Planning and Community Development Committee, which as of last night has a new chair, Councillor Noel Mueller. And third, public input welcomed through the process up to the adjournment of the public hearing, and that'll be some time. But we've got the online survey online until September 30th, end of the month. We want you to do that. Then there will be public consultation as we go forward on that. We still have the input opportunities from the public consultation, which is the online survey. There will be a draft of an OCP amendment, and there's an entire public process around the OCP, and then there's the bylaw amendment process. So lots of time to get input in and help us make the best decisions for the future of Sechelt. Is there anything else that we need to deal with? Anyone? Final comments from planners? Let's do that. Final comments.
And there's one step that for an official community plan amendment, you must send it out for consultation to certain groups, and that includes the First Nations, adjoining regional districts or municipalities, and also council will determine what other groups it will send it to. Vancouver Coastal Health Authority might be one, BC Housing might be another, perhaps also to all of the neighborhood associations. So we'll be looking for comments from them on this, as well as the Department of Highways, because a lot of these locations will be within 800 meters of, so we would like to get their input as well.
And BC Transit.
Yeah, BC Transit is another one. Sunshine Coast Regional District will go to their water folks, their planners, as well as to their BC Transit manager.
And Councillor Seekers reminded us, and the fire department, to make sure the ladders reach to the top of the heights. They can, yeah, they do buy new ladders. It's always an opportunity for the boys at the fire hall to get a bigger truck and a longer ladder. It's mixed gender at our fire hall, just so everyone knows, multiple genders. Anyone who wants to be a volunteer and can take the stamina and tests, so we welcome those all. I want to thank everybody for this evening's event. Certainly the staff that put this together, Connie Jodison, Carrie-Ann Paulson, Siobhan Smith, did a lot of work here, and we've had all the planning staff from the director on down to municipal planner and community planner. Sorry if I get the titles wrong. I appreciate that. So thank you very much for those who attended today, and thank you very much for those who watched online and entertained online, interlocutors from online who emailed us and sent us those questions and advice. And that's it for tonight.